There's so many ways for you to show up online, profit, and make an impact with your business. That's what the Heart-Centered Business Success Show is all about. Inspiring you with stories of generous women and equipping you with real strategies to help your business succeed, because I know you've got a powerful gift to share. Thanks for tuning into the show. I'm here with Kate Boyd, who is the founder of Cobblestone Creative Co. and launch strategist. Welcome, Kate, to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
And side note, just a great friend and amazing human, so I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, same here. I feel like we go way back.
Oh my gosh.
In online terms.
Literally. So if someone's watching this and they've never met you before, can you just introduce them a little bit to who you are and what you do for your business?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, I have a business called Cobblestone Creative Co. And we're essentially a digital marketing agency, but we really focus on things that help people get higher conversions, but in like a handcrafted, very human feeling way. So we take the digital marketing and the content and the strategy and make it feel a lot like you and make it really resonate with your audience so that it works its magic in all the ways that it can for both sides of the equation, so that you serve better, but you still have, that freedom aspect for yourself.
So what's your biggest tip or biggest piece of advice if there is someone that's in that boat and they're not they heard what you said and they're like, oh my gosh, yes, that's what I need, but they're not sure if they're ready for it? What do you find is a good litmus test for readiness?
Readiness for support or yeah. I think, and we were just talking about this a little bit, but I think a lot of people sort of undervalue their own mental space. And so I think that's a thing when you're feeling really crowded or overwhelmed just with like all the things that you need to do, and you're starting to think, there's no way I can bring more people on, or there's no way that I can serve any more people, or you're really kind of at almost that burnout place, right? Where you're feeling like I should be able to do this better. And I think the hard part is that our content and our marketing is very personal, as it should be, right? Because it's a reflection of us as a person, but also as our business. And so a lot of people have a hard time releasing that part until they're like super overwhelmed. So I would prefer people not get there. Wow. But I think that's part of it is yes, look at your finances and make sure that you can do that. But then start weighing like the pros and cons, because I think a lot of people think that they should hold on to it because it is so personal to them and it should be in their voice and it should do all these things. But if that's keeping you from bringing on another client or from launching that group program that you want to, or even just being able to spend more time with your family, right? Like whenever your business starts to encroach on those other priorities in your life, that's when you really need to start considering bringing on more help or restructuring things, maybe even in your business, to be able to do that or to accommodate those other priorities in your life.
I love the answer. And I love too the advice to not wait until, I feel like I tend to learn the hard way, right? And you're right, like wait till it's like, I'm about to shut down my business, I'm feeling so dang overwhelmed, right? But like waiting, seeing the value of the white space and seeing the value of, yes, I'm going to invest my money, but in exchange, I'm going to be able to have more time and make more money in my business.
Totally. And I think this is the hard part, is that you don't actually know the value of that white space until you create some. So it's almost like a little catch-22. You need that, but it's not until you make that space. So like sometimes it can be as little as, planning a vacation and like really actually unplugging on that. Gosh, the last vacation I took back in September, it was like I unplugged for like half a day, got on the airplane that evening, and I already had like 1,000 ideas because I had actually just created the space for it. Wow. And so I think that's a big thing, is just not like, even if you just find those little spaces and then allow yourself to have that white space and then really weigh the balance. Most of the time we're worried about that money, but if we actually did more of what we enjoyed, like your coaching or whatever, you would really only need to sign on maybe one client to cover the cost, right? So if that would free you up to do that and you love that more, then maybe it's worth that trade-off,
Powerful. What would you say to someone that's sitting in that overwhelm and they're like, oh my gosh, that's true. Like I haven't even given myself permission to have the tiniest bit of white space, even before they invest in outsourcing of some sort. What advice would you give them? Because I know you're amazing at doing a morning routine and so many of those like CEO practices. Like what advice would you give them on baby stepping their way into some more CEO white space?
I think it starts sort of with systems, because if you can start systematizing things or like batching things or just creating those little ways where you can actually give yourself a little more time. So some of the things, like I know for me, I've got like a content system, or I've got a VA who's like a really low cost outsourcing thing, right? But that outside accountability to get stuff to her every week makes a big difference for me and makes me actually do it and do it in an efficient way. Or creating those little rituals that do trigger your brain so that things become more efficient or more powerful and more focused whenever you do things. So I think creating those little like systems, like trick yourself sometimes into doing those things, helps you get more done in less time and sort of by default creates more white space for you.
So good. Or just rip the Band-Aid off, hire Kate because she's amazing and it'll happen, right? You don't have to learn the hard way.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, you can always look ahead and skip over some of that as well. So really, but do the math, right? Like do the math, like personally and inside and financially. And then you start to really see what will happen or what needs to happen so that you can do that kind of thing, to make it easy to hand off stuff whenever you do get to that point. And you should be planning for that point. I think a lot of people just don't plan for that point. But do that early and it'll become so much easier.
I'll get to the questions I actually wrote down too, but I thought of one more. Like when you think about all the work you do for your clients, what's your absolute favorite part of your job?
I really just like, first, I like that I get to support people and bringing their vision to life. That's really important to me, is to like work with people that I really care about and help them launch the products that they really love or that will really make a difference. And so I'm sort of like the support person, but I love helping to connect those dots for them and for their audience. I think that's really what I do, is help sort of outline the communication that gets their people from one place to the other. And so getting in there and collaborating with them to create that is really my favorite part.
I love that. I feel like it's true. Like, and that's why it's neat that you work with people that are heart-centered and filled with integrity, because it's like when they have a vision, and if you can latch onto that vision, then it's like, yeah, that collaboration of moving towards it faster instead of someone feeling like they have to do it alone.
Totally.
Amazing. Okay, so because I think it's exciting, can you tell us the story about how you connected with, I know you've had several businesses, but when you think about your very first business, how did you first connect with your clients?
So my very first business was actually a digital product business, because I built it on the side of my job, and I had been blogging for a year. So I'd sort of built a small email list. It was around 100 people at the time, and I knew that I wanted to, at that point, switch it into an actual business and start making money from it. So I needed to figure out how to do that or what they wanted. So I had that small group of people, and I sent a survey to all of my readers, and got a lot of good responses. And one of the questions was, what's your biggest struggle in this or that? And there was one theme that came up really strongly for all of them. So for them, it was, I had a blog that was aimed at cheerleading coaches, helping them with the technique and the leadership, though they had a lot of the leadership down because a lot of them were teachers and things like that. They didn't really have the like actual cheerleading part down, and that's where they struggled. And they all felt really overwhelmed when it came to stunting. So if you know cheerleading, they would do lots of crazy, dangerous things to outside people, but there is a way to do them safely, right? And these people, they just were not cheerleaders before. They didn't have any reference points. So they didn't really know how to approach those with any kind of credibility, which of course hurt their leadership ability. And so I was like, okay, so what am I going to be able to do? Because I almost actually launched something else. I had an idea for what I wanted to create and what I had planned to create. And then I sent that survey and realized that's not really what they needed. So I took that information and outlined an online course of all things. And then I launched it. Like I put up a little waiting list and said, hey, or I put up a sales page first. I found like an article on Copy Blogger on what needs to be on a sales page.
And also you're just a natural at writing sales pages. So there's that.
I mean, at the time I was a copywriter and social media coordinator. So it was kind of in my wheelhouse, but I needed to know like what actually to put on the page, like what needed to be there. So I put together the sales page and I put together a waiting list. Like I was using MailChimp. So I created a new list for a waiting list. And I just told people about it. Like, this is a thing that I'm thinking about. Here's a waiting list if you're interested. And I think I ran maybe like $50 in Facebook ads, which back then was like really cheap. And cheerleading was so niche that it was like super inexpensive. And I ran it for the waiting list. Like I didn't run it for an opt-in or anything. It was like literally just for this waiting list for this program. And I ended up with about 50 people on that waiting list. Can you hear my dog?
You're fine. You're okay. Totally fine. It's just, people that are in my tribe know that it's just noisy. Like there are children there.
Somebody just rang the doorbell, so he's just going to bark until it's over. So I did the waiting list and sent them an email once I like closed the ad, and then I sent the email to them with the sales page and said, here's the program that I created, excited to share it with you. And then I was like, so I sort of had like kind of a 2-week open cart, like looking back, that's what we would call it. But back then I didn't really know what I was calling it. And so I was just like, okay, what would be helpful for them to know before they do this? Or what are they thinking? So I kind of just came up with the objections that I thought they would have and wrote 3 or 4 emails about those things. Wow. And just reminded them that like the next time it comes out, it'll be more expensive. And I know a lot of people do like beta, and this was essentially a beta. I think anytime you run a first time, it's a beta, but I didn't call it a beta. Not that I don't think they would have known the difference because it wasn't really an online business industry thing, but I did that. And, by the end of the launch, when I closed the card, I had 12 people in the program and at like $79. So I had basically made my first $1,000 in business from like a launch that I kind of made up on the fly and just sort of went with, but it worked out really well. And that was my first program and turned into a lot of other things. So I would say like my blog was really central to bringing a lot of those people to me. And then I did that launch, and even after that, I was able to re-release the program and make it more extensive and all of that good stuff, and even had a high-end service that I had for choreography that I would regularly fill without even having to ask for that. People would just sign up or email me and see if I had spots open. And so it just kind of built itself once I really hit like the niche part on and was answering people's questions. Everything just kind of grew from there.
I love that. I love that theme too at the very start where, you had been faithfully nurturing your audience accidentally, right, by blogging. Mm-hmm. And then when it was time to monetize, like you just asked, right? Like you didn't assume. And I've done that so many times where I'm like, I have a great idea. And then I'm like, Mel, just ask just to make sure that they really like my idea. And then it's like, oh my gosh, no one picked my idea. Everyone picks it, right? And it's like, there's a blend, right? We obviously want to not give options of things that sound awful, but I love that you just showed up, you gave value, you asked, you listened, and then you just created the thing.
Yeah, it was kind of weird. And even after I was making it or outlining it, I was like, I don't really even know how I'm going to go about teaching stunts with an online course, but I'm going to figure it out. And so I was able to do it, and people loved it. And it grew into, by the end of it, when I actually sold that business last year, over 300 people had taken that course, which is really crazy.
Wow.
And that's how it all started. Everything sort of came out of that one thing.
I think there's something beautiful about those like first stories, because I think I'm seeing a theme, at least for myself and like, the people I'm interviewing, that it's like there's this naive like beauty to the like, I'm just going to show up and do it, and I'm going to sell it. And if people don't buy it, it's not a huge deal. But like, and I think so often in our journey, right, we like lose some of that, and we like lose the confidence, and we lose the, I don't know, like what, or I don't know, as you're thinking about your biggest heart-centered problem, maybe it's related, maybe it's completely different, but what do you feel like in your journey has held you back the most, even though you did have that burst of success right out the gate?
Yeah. I mean, I think, gosh, as far as like a heart-centered problem, I feel like imposter syndrome has always been a really big struggle for me. And, or even just like feeling that well, and that's imposter syndrome, feeling like I knew enough, right, to actually share with people or teach people, or that I had the ability to even like communicate that thing that I needed to. And I think that's something I'm still working through, not just on my side, but how do I actually like take this thing that feels really abstract or difficult and translate it for people in a way that they could take it and actually use it, and not just, and customize it. Cause I think that's what's the hard part. Like with stunts, it was easy, not easy, but it was like, these are the rules and these are the mechanics, right? And if you can do it other ways, but that would be wrong or not safe, right? And when you get to like what I do now, it's very different because everybody's life and business and people are different. So how I translate things, for each person is different. And sometimes even just wondering like, how in the world am I supposed to get that across for people? Or even having like, it took me a really long time to even realize that launching was something I was good at, which is primarily what I focus on now, because other parts of my business are full, but that's what I'm focusing on. But I didn't even realize that was something people had a hard time with. You know what I mean? And I think part of the problem is that our gifts are so normal to us, right? The things that we do naturally, we think of as easy. And so we just assume they're easy for everybody else until you start hearing other people's stories, or they're talking about it. Or you experiment with it with a couple of different clients and you're like, oh, that was actually really good. And that's when I start to be like, okay, now there's evidence, right, for me to believe this. And I think that's a little bit easier. But even just having people in my life to say like, other people can't do that, right? Like that's something that you do that's different than how I do it, or better than how I do it. And so really just having those people in my life has been really helpful too, to even overcome those things that feel like they're too much, or that I'm not as good as I say that I am, if that makes sense.
Totally. You dabbled on this some, but what do you feel like has been the most helpful in overcoming that? Both the imposter syndrome piece, I guess mainly the imposter syndrome piece.
Yeah, I think for me, it has been a lot of community. It has been a lot of people in my life to be able to point things out, or speak truth to me, which I think has been really helpful. Because I even just remember, it can even just be a mentor, right? It was a year or so ago, I was working with a coach, and I just launched a little like mini course to my list. And she was like, wow, you came up with that launch plan really fast, and it's really good, and all these things. And so that made me go like, oh, she's like, not everybody can do that. And so that was like the first sort of thing, and just like letting it marinate, and then even sort of seeing it play out in other people. Or I even just have really focused on cultivating a lot of like friendships. Like you and I have been friends for a long time. And there are days when I'm like, gosh, I feel like I really suck, or this is something that I'm struggling with, or I'm having a hard time. And so having some of those people that you can just reach out to and say like, ugh, this is how I'm feeling. And even just saying like, could you pray for me about that? I've got some really good believer friends. Or can you help me process this? Like, am I wrong? And even like being willing to even say like, am I thinking about this wrong? Like, what do I do with this client situation? What do you think? So just really cultivating a community around me, and then just being aware, and then like keeping aware of what people respond to and tell me. And I think that's something too, even if it's coming from my list, right? They're saying, oh, I really loved this thing that you did, or I really loved the way that you said that, or even just paying attention to like how your clients come to you, right? And I was like, oh, that's how I knew email was my thing, because that's where all my people come from. And so it's really a sense of like looking for the evidence to the contrary, but like being intentional about that, whether that's through, and mostly through other people for me.
I love that. I think it's so true. Our community can be that mirror for us, right? And help us see things that we didn't even know, because you're right. They're like so close to us, or we're naturally good at it. So it's hard to see that we're good at those things.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So if people are watching this and they're like, how do I get more Kate Boyd in my life? Tell us how we can continue to follow you, and if you have any free resources.
Yes. So I have, you can find me on my website, cobblestonecreativeco.com. And then on Facebook, Cobblestone Creative Co. and Instagram at cobblestonecreative.co. And then let's see, freebies. I've got several freebies, but I think for you guys, since we've talked a little bit about launching, I've got a launch checklist that I have that'll just help you think through some of the main things that you need for your launch and how much time you need for your launch before you really start planning that whole thing. And you can get that at cobblestonecreativeco.com/checklist.
Beautiful. I'll put the link to that too in the show notes. Kate, thank you so much for being here. Do you have any parting words or thoughts for us as we wrap up?
I mean, just to reiterate, like, surround yourself with good people and be intentional about cultivating that, even though it feels like you don't have time. You know, taking half an hour a month or every couple of weeks will be worth it when you need those people. And so, yeah, find ways to connect yourself, even in like online world, because it will help you, especially when you feel like you're in it alone or you're battling some of those things.
So good. Thank you so much, Kate. Thank you for being here.
Thanks.